Good morning. I'm Bobb Biehl, and over the last 35 years or so, since 1976, I've consulted with about 500 organizations. I've spent one-to-one time with about 5,000 executive team members, and I estimate I spent 50,000 hours helping people deal with things. And in that time, I've seen certain patterns develop. And those have I've developed tools to help people know how to best deal with those situations they're struggling with. And that's what I'd like to help you with this morning, is to introduce you to a tool that would be hopefully helpful to you. Your responsibility is not only, as a leader, is not only to sort out the direction for your team, but also to organize the team, to tell the team who's supposed to do what, who is responsible for what, who is responsible for whom, and do we have and get the right players in the right place. That's your responsibility. This tool is simply a tool to help you do that. It's also a tool that's scalable. It's scalable in terms of size. In other words, if you have a very small church of just 2 people, you're going in to plant a church, you need all of these people on the team. It's just that you're playing the role of all of them. You're playing all these roles. And then when a person comes along that will work with you on an unpaid basis, you can say, would you take responsibility for this, or would you take responsibility for this or this? And so as you start up, you've got this basic needs, or these basic roles to play. But on the other hand, when you get to be 500, you've still got the same basic roles. When you get to be 15,000, one of my churches is 11. I have 2 churches I consult with that are around about 11,000 people on a Sunday. These are still the functions they have. So I'd like to teach you a scalable tool that no matter how large your organization or church becomes, you don't have to move very far from what's here, okay? And it'll last you the rest of your life, regardless of how big your system becomes, and no matter what organization you're a part of, whether it's a nonprofit organization or a church or a corporation. You can use the same basic model to organize your team. That's what I'd like to teach you in the next few minutes. Typically, the starting point of an organization, and before I get here, I would say that 85% of leadership is 3 things. It's clear direction, the right team, and enough money. In the last session, we covered how to define direction for your team. Now we're defining how do you organize your team? How do you find the right team members? How do you get the thing organized? And then in a later session, we'll deal with how do you manage the money. But right now, we're dealing with the organization. How do you organize a team? Any team tends to have a board. On your handout, it just says board, but that could be a vestry, a session, it could be whatever you call it. It doesn't matter. It's a group of people who, particularly in a nonprofit organization, are responsible to carry on the organization after you as the executive director have left or died or something. In other words, it feels often to a founder like it's my organization, but it isn't. It actually belongs to the board of directors, because they're the ones that carry it on after you decide to go do something else. That's why it's so important to get the right board members. Often it's easy to find just board members that'll help, or your friends or something like that. But the reality is you want to choose as strong a board as you can. Not a board that's going to resist and block everything you're trying to do, and not one that's just going to say yes to everything you want to do. What you're looking for in a board is a board that will be both supportive of you and protective of you. They'll protect you from making unwise decisions. When they see you doing something they don't think is wise, they will say, you know what, that's not wise. You should not do that. And when you say, I want to do it anyway, they have the ability to say, no, that would hurt the organization. It's not wise. Do not do that. And they are, in fact, the ones that get that call. The board gets the call. And a key to choosing members, by the way, when you're starting an organization, it's very difficult. Like if you're in a startup phase, your first 2 years, it's very difficult to attract strong board members. It's very difficult. And so what I would encourage you to do is just have the legal board, which is 2 or 3 people, and then have an advisory council. And then 2 years into it, you're going to be shocked at how much more you know what's really going to go on, what you really need, who you can really trust, and you're going to have 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 people to choose from instead of the 3 or 4 that were with you in the beginning. So I'd have as small a board as I could have legally as your official board when you're starting, and then 2 years later actually add some people to the board. But have an advisory council to begin with, so you got 5 or 6 people around you, but not official board members. Does that make sense? Okay. Then you have a senior executive, which I am assuming this morning is you. That's the president, that's the senior pastor, that's the executive director, that's the CEO. Then off to the side, you have a what I would call a CFO, a chief financial officer. But what this is actually, in my model, is as president, you need someone who is what I call a creative money person. Everything they touch turns to gold. They don't have to be full-time until you're about 20 million, which may be a long ways off for you. Till your organization is $20 million a year, you don't need a full-time CFO. You need a full-time accountant or a full-time bookkeeper or a full-time controller, but you don't really need a CFO full-time until you're about 20 million, in my opinion. But you need someone on the board or who is a friend and advisor who can help you know how to make money, who, like I say, everything they touch turns to gold. You don't want a CFO who is a bankrupt person advising you. You want someone who really knows how to help you make the wise decisions when it comes to buying buildings or investing money or anything like that. That they simply know how to help you manage your money. It isn't keep track of money day to day. That's down in administrative services. Administrative services is like your IT, your computers, etc. It's your HR, your personnel. It's your accounting and bookkeeping. It's your administrative services, facilities management, those kind of things. That's administrative services. And then over here, you've got communication services. That's your public relations, marketing, fundraising, computer development, those kind of things. That's communicating with people. Often the temptation, by the way, the CFO is an advisor to administrative services, but is not in administrative services. But often the temptation in a small startup group is to have communication services report to administrative services. Wrong. Wrong. Let me show you why. Your board and your senior executive tend to be like the steering wheel or steering mechanism of your organization. You basically steer the direction of the organization. If you're going along in a Bugatti at 245 miles an hour, street legal or Autobahn legal, 245 miles an hour, and your steering wheel comes off in your hands, what have you got? Pretty dangerous situation. if you've got an organization that's going, really growing fast, but you don't have wise board and senior executive, what have you got? You've got problems. But let's say you've got a great steering mechanism and you come to a turn at 245 miles an hour and you push down on the brake and it goes clear to the floor and nothing happens. If you've got nothing to tell you it's time to stop and go slower, you got problems. That's your administrative service. That's your accounting and bookkeeping saying you can't spend 200,000 euros right now because we don't have it in the bank. Or you shouldn't spend it because we don't have it in the bank. Your administrative services should not tell you what you can and cannot do. They should tell you what the situation is that lets you as the president make a wise decision on what you will and won't do. But over here is the gas. Your public relations, marketing, fundraising web is what gives you the gas, the capital, the money to go. What if you're going along at 245, your steering is working right, your brake is working right, but you run out of fuel, which you do pretty quickly at 245 miles an hour with the V16 engine. We saw one, Cheryl and I saw one in Berlin the other day. It's something to behold. Anyway. It was in a showroom, so we could just gaze at it and lust after it and envy people who have them and all kinds of stuff you shouldn't do. But let's say you're going along at 245 miles an hour and you run out of fuel. What have you got? You got a nice, comfortable chair beside the Autobahn, right? I mean, it's like you're nowhere if you don't have capital. You can't go anywhere if you don't have money to get there. But often, if you put the gas reporting to the brake simply says, no, you can't spend that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't. And all of a sudden, you just never have the capital. You never have the money to get started. You never have money because this brake keeps saying, no, 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 no. The senior executive should have the ability to decide when do we push on the accelerator and when do we push on the brake and how hard and how fast and how deep do we go in that pressing. That should be your decision, not administrative services, to know how much gas it's time to put. Then you have the engines actually work down here. It's the engines, if you go along and all of a sudden you stop at a plaza to get something to eat, and someone comes in and replaces your Bugatti engine with a Volkswagen engine, a 4-cylinder engine or something like that, you're in trouble if you don't have a strong engine for your car. What actually drives the organization is the departments or divisions that actually relate to the people. In a church, it's Christian education department, the missions and outreach department, the pastoral care department, the worship and music department. They are the people that actually encounter the people. Administrative services may be in the office, communication services may be in the office, but here is your engine. And so you've got to have, as a senior executive, you've got to know when something sounds wrong down here, when there's something in the engine that just isn't working right. Instead of 16 cylinders, you've only got 3 cylinders working and the rest of them aren't working right. You've got to know when there's something wrong down here. You've got to know when you're getting low on fuel. You've got to know when your brake need to be replaced. And you've got to keep the overall of where are we going. And again, you may have 3 kids in the Christian education department or 3 people, or you may have 30, or you may have 300 or 3,000 or 30,000, but it's still Christian education. You may be supporting 2 missionaries or 2,000 missionaries, but it's still missions and outreach. You may have pastoral care that's caring for 2 individuals or 2 elderly people or 2 people in the hospital or 200 or 2,000, but it's still pastoral care. You may have 3 people in your worship service. You may have 300 or 3,000 or 30,000. It's still worship and music. You may be trying to keep track of $100 or $1,000 or 100,000 or 2 million euros, but it's still administrative services. You may be trying to raise in your annual budget through your fundraising, your marketing, your public relations, all that, the same way. It's all scalable. But this particular model works in any church or any organization at any size. If you're a corporation, you've got a senior executive, a board, administrative services, marketing, public relations, fundraising, web development, and then you've got various departments within your corporation that operate the same way. This is what drives the organization, the services you have to people. Let's say you have nothing down here and you just talk about all the stuff you'd like to have, but there's nothing down here. You're just fooling yourself and other people. But you've got to develop, in a sense, profit centers or people who actually work with people, actually making a difference, actually ministering to people. And these are the ways that most typically things are arranged. And in a lot of churches in America, they have a fifth one over here, which is basically a school. There's often a school over there tied to the church as well. Could be an elementary school, or it could be a Bible school or something like that. But there's often a school division over here. But everything else tends to fit in this very simple model of organizing your time. So that as you develop your team, remember you got 3 things you have to keep track of: direction, organization, and cash. And what you're trying to do is clarify the assumptions as to who is responsible. You got 3 questions you're trying to answer with an organizational chart. Whether it's upside down, sideways, backwards, and whatever shape whatever organizational structure you use, you're trying to answer 3 questions. Who is responsible for what? Who is responsible for Christian education? Who is responsible for whom? Who does the director of education report to? Does the director of Christian education report over here, or do they report to the senior executive? Who is responsible for what? Who is responsible for whom? And then, do we have the right person in the right place?